Okay, this room. What's distinctive about this room? Light, windows. Yeah, it's good. Clean. Is that what you said, Sandy? Well, I would maintain that what makes this room really attractive is the windows. If you closed up all those walls, it wouldn't be the same room, right? So we're going to talk about windows today. They're actually really important. Let's get back to Daniel. What do you say? Okay. We are at 539 BC. Woohoo! There's some excitement in the room. That's good. 539, and the Babylonian Empire is no more. It's gone. And the Medo-Persians came in, snuck in the house, basically, of the Babylonian kingdom, and they just took over. It wasn't a silent coup, but it was pretty much, I wouldn't say bloodless, but they're in charge now, the Medo-Persians. And by the way, if you're confused about the Medo-Persians, the Medes and the Persians are the ancient people of present-day Iran. So if you go to the western end of Iran, that's the Medes. They are a much older civilization than the Persians. And the Medes are up in the mountainous hillside in the western end of that. They take over the northern end of the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley. The Persians came along a little bit later and basically kind of assumed them into the kingdom because they're part of the larger whole. So when you have this period in time where they took over the Babylonians, the Medes are kind of the ancient, respected, old-timer Persians, and then you got the Persians. So that's what we got right here. So the Medo-Persian Empire has started. So where we are today in Daniel is the beginning of the Medo-Persian Empire after they trounced Babylon. Okay, so let's see what happens. Story today, which you're very familiar with, so don't go to sleep while we look at it. I've heard this before. No, you haven't. Not like this. Okay, it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom, and over them 3 high officials, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps should give account so that the king might suffer no loss. So here's the setup of the kingdom. Darius is the guy who's in charge. By the way, as an aside, the name Darius is somewhat mysterious, because it turns out that in the history that we have of the area at the time, Darius isn't mentioned much. Cyrus is, and Cyrus is the guy that we heard about earlier that freed the Jews to go back to build the temple and the wall. But Darius, who's Darius? Well, the problem is the Medes, and Darius is a Mede, it tells us. The Medes didn't keep any history. The Persians did, but the Medes didn't. So we don't know much about Darius, but Cyrus will show up in a second too as the king. There's a lot of conflict about who exactly Darius was because we don't have any extra biblical history about him. But he's a real guy. So Darius is in charge right now. He decides to set up his kingdom with 120 satraps, which I always thought was a golf thing. Watch out for the satraps. It's not a golf thing. Satraps are the lower guys, and then 3 guys in charge of them. And Daniel's one of them, which, by the way, is an astonishing thing if you think about. The Medo-Persians took over the Babylonians, and who was a big cheese in the Babylonian Empire? Daniel. He was like in charge of the whole place. So why was it when they took over Babylon, they kicked all those guys out? What you normally do is you get rid of the entire leadership of the previous guys. Daniel should have gone in the clean out when the Medo-Persians came in, but he didn't. Why? We don't know. But he is instantly recognized as being someone who can be valuable to the Medo-Persians. So maybe they came in and someone said, hey, look, kill everybody. Don't kill Daniel. He's been really good in our kingdom. We don't know. But anyway, so he's in the top 3 guys right here. The only ones above these 3 guys is Darius himself. And so this is how they've set up the kingdom. And it's a vast kingdom. So verse 3, so Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps because of the excellent spirit that was in him. And anytime someone excels in government, everyone else plots to kill him. One of my biggest shortfalls when I was in the electronics industry is underestimating what office politics means. And so as you actually start to excel in certain things, other people get jealous, and then they start spreading rumors and nasties about you. And I thought, well, why would they do this? I'm a nice guy. Well, jealousy. So we're talking about politics on a large scale right here. And you'll actually recognize some of the tactics in a second, because this is still used every year in American politics. What? Yes. This is age old. This is age old. And this is from 2,500 years ago. Well, Daniel's doing well. So we get to the next verse. And the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Now that is going to get you killed, right? Because of jealousy. That's what's going on. And probably the other two guys do this. So verse 4. So the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom. And this happens to this very day when you have political campaigns going on. What do? You look for dirt on the other guys. And then you advertise it. Say, oh, you don't want to vote for them, but oh, look what's in there, hidden in their closet. Oh, this is really bad. So every campaign goes into this powerful effort to go and look at all the skeletons in the closets of the other guys. Because if you can make those known, you're going to win. Well, this is exactly what's going on right here, 2,500 years old, proven technique. So they want to find something that Daniel has done wrong. The problem is, but they could find no ground for complaint or any fault because he was faithful and no error or fault was found in him. So they searched his closet and there were no skeletons. What? There's nothing. And now we're talking about the two guys were at his peer level and the satraps. They're all looking into Daniel's background and they cannot find anything that they can publish that they can do dirt on Daniel. So that's not going to work. That's rule number one in politics. Make the other guy look really bad by looking at what he's done bad, right? That's rule number one. Well, maybe there's another way. Then these men said, well, we shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God. Because this guy's a Jew and he's got a different law. Now, it says if we do it in connection with the law of his God. Today, you know what we call this technique? Lawfare. Oh, you use the law in a legal way to take someone down. This is how it's done today. It's very popular in politics today. Okay, so then these high officials and the satraps came by agreement to the king and said to him, now by agreement means this is a big conspiracy. Everyone knows about this except Daniel. So here's a big conspiracy. They came by agreement to the king and they said to the king, "Oh, King Darius, live forever." Remember, that's what you're supposed to say next time you're in front of a king. You're supposed to say, "Oh, live forever." Yeah, okay. "Oh, King Darius, live forever." All the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects, the satraps, the counselors, and the governors are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction. Now, this is a lie slightly because not all the high officials were agreed about this because Daniel seems to not know anything about it. So this is everybody else except Daniel. But they come to the king and they say, "Oh, we're all in agreement. We're all in agreement. This is what needs to happen." And so Darius is perking up and he says, "Oh, well, you guys are in charge of the kingdom. Let's see what we're going to do. We're in agreement about this." To do what? "That whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions." Does that sound like a good idea, Darius? What do you think? People need to pay respect to you, not to their own god or any other man. They need to pay respect to you. Does that sound good, Darius? What do you think? Let's put it on paper. So they press him to put it on paper for an important reason. "Now, O king, establish the injunction, sign the document so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked." So once it gets on paper, it can't be changed even by the king. Even by the king. Now, you remember the story of Esther? If you remember the story of Esther, they put out this bad dictate from the king to kill all the Jews. Well, when the king finds out he's sort of been tricked, you would think that he would reverse the law. But in the story of Esther, he says, well, once it's on paper, I can't reverse the law. So on this particular date, anyone who's around who has a Jew living next door can kill the Jews. So we cannot revoke that, even though now the king's saying that's wrong. We shouldn't have done that, but we can't revoke it. So you remember what the solution in Esther was? They didn't revoke that law. They basically said we're going to add another law. And the second law was, on that same date, you Jews, you can take up a sword and defend yourselves. So that's what they did. So they did that law, and it turns out the Jews defended themselves so well that there was bloodshed in the other direction rather than the Jews. But this is the same problem. Persian law is, the king can say anything he wants, and it's instant law, And he can change his mind anytime he wants until he writes it on paper. Then it cannot be changed even by the king. So that's why these guys are pressing him. The king doesn't know what's going down. They don't know this is a setup. So they're saying, eventually he's going to realize that he doesn't want to follow through with this order. So let's put it on paper so he cannot change it. Sneaky. So King Darius signed the document and the injunction. You have the same problem in Esther. When that goes down, you read Esther, and he has great regret. And well, now it turns out Darius is good buddies with Daniel. I mean, he likes Daniel. So now, after he signs it, he's going to realize, maybe I shouldn't have done that, but now I'm stuck. So it's now law. It cannot be changed by anybody. It must happen. Verse 10. So when Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he got a bus pass and left Iran. No. You're looking at me like, he did? No. But now, isn't that what you would do? If you were Daniel and you saw all your peers and all the people under you conspire against you to take you down, wouldn't you leave? Isn't that what, come on, isn't that the natural thing? Because your goose is cooked, they can't change the law. So, oh no, wait, there's another option. It's for anybody who is worshiping another god. So I can stop worshiping my God. So those are my options. If I want to preserve my life, I can either leave the whole area of the Medo-Persians, present-day Iran, or I can stop worshiping my God. So which of those does he do? Neither, actually. So, certain death? Certain death. Well, not quite. So when Daniel knew that the document had been signed, which means Daniel knew it could not be changed, what he did, he went to his house where he had windows. See, I told you we'd get back to windows. That had windows in the upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. So see, this is really pretty fascinating. So he hears that this dictate has been put out that's going to get him killed, no question. And the king cannot reverse it no matter how buddy-buddy he is with the king. So what he does, I'm going to my house. I'm going to find in my upper room the windows. Well, why? I gotta love these stories. So he got down on his knees 3 times a day, prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he had done previously. So he didn't do anything different, except maybe got a little closer to the windows. We don't know. But this prayer that he'd done 3 times a day, he'd always done this. He did not change his pattern. Remember I said one of the 2 options is stop worshiping God? He says, nope, not going to happen. I'm going to keep praying, but I'm going to get close to the windows so they can see me. What? This is madness. You're going to get killed. Someone's going to see you. And you have to believe that his enemies were looking out. I mean, they were probably hunkered down on the street, across the street from his house, waiting to see Daniel do this, and have multiple guys see this so they can come to the king and say, we were there, we saw him. He prayed 3 times yesterday, right? That's what they're going to do. So Daniel doesn't hide it. Now, look, he could have continued to pray to God and gone down to the basement of his house or some dark place, but he deliberately does not do that. He deliberately does not do that. And that might have saved his life, because then all the other guys who are his enemies probably couldn't get enough evidence to prove that he'd been doing this because they couldn't see them. But now he's in front of the window, he's making it so they can gather evidence. Why would you do this? He prays. Then these men came by agreement. It's a conspiracy. They came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. So actually they did get together and say, let's station a bunch of our guys in front of Daniel's house and you watch. And if he's praying, you write down the time and everything, and we'll have waves of guys. So by agreement, they actually stake out Daniel's house, waiting to see him violate the king's dictate, so they can have multiple witnesses. Then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, "O king!" Well, probably not like that, but something close to that. Something, or maybe something more like this: "O king." Here you can put whatever inflection you want, but they got his attention, and then they bring their evidence. Didn't you sign an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man within 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast in the den of lions. Didn't you sign that? They didn't say, didn't you say that? Didn't you sign that? Permanent ink. And the king answered and said, well, the thing stands fast, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. So the king says, yeah, I wrote that, and it can't be revoked. So what's the big deal? What's the big deal? This is the big deal. They answered and said before the king, Daniel, who's one of those exiles from Judah, he pays no attention to you, O king. Now look, this is the guy who has the trust of the king, that the king is ready to hand over the whole kingdom to. He pays no attention to you, O king. This is so modern day politics smearing. It is just, it's just like, this just works. So that's why it's endured for 2,500 years. He pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you've signed, but he makes his petition 3 times a day. Now, this news probably just smacked Darius in the face. Like, you mean the guy I was going to give the kingdom to? The guy I get along so well with? The guy who's a great executor of the kingdom, the biggest kingdom superpower in the world? You mean this guy is ignoring what I said? Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel. But he signed the paper. He signed the paper. So unless he wants to get pushed out as the king of the Medo-Persian Empire and disregard that, which you cannot do, he's really stuck between a rock and a hard place. So he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know quite what he did to labor. But if I use my speculative imagination, he might have gone around to some of those leaders and said, you guys tricked me. This is wrong. You knew that Daniel always did this. Let's change on this thing. Let's do something different. In politics, what you do is you work the masses, even in your political enemies. You put together alliances. You do whatever you can do politically to do this. So we don't really know what Darius did, but he's really spinning his wheels, because once this is on paper, he's just stuck. He's absolutely stuck. And he's also emotionally distraught about this. He labored till the sun went down to rescue him. 15, and then these men came by agreement. By agreement means it's a conspiracy. The men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed. Nothing can change. We were reminding you, O great Darius, nothing can change. They've got him. They've got the perfect plot. They've figured out a way to take Daniel down, to take down the influence of the God of Israel down. They've figured it out. It's ironclad. It cannot be stopped. It's on paper. The king has to do what it says on paper. Perfect. It's the perfect plot. We have succeeded, they're saying. Remember, king, you have to do this. Perfect snare. Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast in the lion's den. This picture, by the way, is by a guy named Britton Riviere. He's a painter from the late 19th century. He died right after World War I. Interesting guy. But you know what his claim to fame is, Britton Riviere? His claim to his fame for his artwork is his painting of animals. Every Britton Riviere picture has animals in it. He loved to paint animals, what they were doing. So in this particular picture, he decided it's finally time for me to do some lions. I'm not going to do lions on the veld. I'm going to do lions in the lion's den. So he did this picture, and it's very famous. This is the most famous picture of Daniel in the lion's den. 7 lions, 2 males, and 5 females. And that'll be important in just a second. What? Don't worry about it. But also, Daniel's portrayed as kind of an older guy right here, and he was an older guy by this time. So that's pretty accurate. It's pretty accurate. Also, you can't probably see it where you're sitting, but on that wall on the right there that has a little bit of sunlight on it, there's some hieroglyphics on that wall, kind of etched into the wall. And one of the hieroglyphics shows a person in power leading a lion by a chain to attack his enemies. It's just a great picture. Britton Riviere. Yeah, great stuff. And the lions, not a single one of the lions has the same pose. That's what Britton Riviere was really good at. So here we got Daniel in the lion's den. Throw a little bones on the floor and you know there's some danger. Okay, so the king reluctantly has to follow through with this law that he signed, which is a byword to us today. be careful what you sign until you read the fine print. Now, in his case, there was no fine print. He just wasn't thinking, really. I mean, he knows Daniel. He knows Daniel's a Jew. He knows Daniel's patterns. He knows that he prays. I mean, he just wasn't thinking. And so that's one of the biggest harms we have from politicians in government today, is they enact things without thinking about the unseen circumstances that can come out. Unforeseen circumstances. So he regrets it, but he has to throw Daniel in there. So the king declared to Daniel, as he does this, "May your God whom you serve continually deliver you." He knows Daniel's position with God. And so a stone was brought, laid on the mouth of the den to seal it up really nice and tidy. And the king sealed it with his own signet ring. Remember those rings that have that pattern? You stick them in the wax. He seals it with his own signet ring and with the signet of the Lord. So he uses the lords of the other guys in charge. So this is according to me and according to the guys that work for me, right? He seals it that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Now we can't really relate to this whole signet ring sealing sort of thing. But let me give you an example that you may not know about, what you've maybe seen before. And it's this right here. This is a sealed tomb. This is the sealed tomb of Tutankhamun, King Tut. In 1922, when they found Tut's tomb, they found various chambers inside, and the chambers were all sealed. So what's the seal? It's a rope that connects, in this particular case, between the two handles. And there on the right, I colored it slightly red so you can see it, is a wax signet ring insignia. And basically, it's the insignia of the person in power. So it says, if you break this seal, then you are against the ruling leader who's done this, and they'll come out and they'll get you and they'll kill you. Now, it's not like stupid horror movies where it's a curse of King Tut. It's not like that. But it's that this is the authority saying that when I seal this, although anyone can cut through this, but if you cut through this and you cut through here, then you're going to answer to me, says the king, says Pharaoh. So that's what those are. So it turns out, oh, by the way, this was tied in around 1300 BC, which means this thing you're seeing right here predated King David. What? Predated. In fact, this rope tie seal existed for over 3,000 years before it was uncovered in 1922. It's amazing. It was there during the time of Jesus. Looked just like this. Now, frankly, between you and me, when you make a rope out of organic materials, it's not going to last 3,000 years. Unless you bury it in the driest place in the earth where there's no humidity. And that would be where the tomb was. So that's why it exists. Okay, so he puts a seal on it, and he says, although reluctantly I've thrown Daniel here, I stick the stone on, I put the seal on it, and no one touch this or else Darius will come after you. So much conflicted emotions for Darius. So the king went to his palace. He spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. He was really messed up about this. Really messed up. Spent the night fasting. Sleep fled. By the way, the diversions that were brought to him, kings, when they couldn't sleep at night, you had court guys who would help you go to sleep. They would bring various things to you. Sometimes they'd bring in a musician. They'd play for you. That's what Saul did with young David. Remember that? So these diversions were brought in. Sometimes it's a pretty girl. Sometimes it's whatever. People to discuss. Sometimes to read stories. I mean, those are the diversions. He didn't ask for any of those things. In his agony, he spent his night awake trying to figure out what was going to happen. And it's a for sure thing. You throw your friend and administrator with hungry lions and he's going to die. And so he just messed up about this all night long. Well, the break of day comes. Then at break of day, the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. He went in haste to the den of lions. And as he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish, which, must have been fascinating for the people of the Medo-Persians to see. Right? Daniel's been thrown into the lion's den. And here comes the king at the break of dawn, coming to where Daniel is with these lions, and he's crying out in a tone of anguish, which is really only closely similar to like the anguish and tone you do when you mourn a death during those times. In a sense, he's kind of mourning the death by doing this. But this is the king. This is Darius, who's now mourning publicly about the fact that Daniel's probably dead. So the king declared to Daniel, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able to deliver you from the lions?" There's a way he could look into the lion's den and just say this to him. Which, by the way, brings us the second picture by Riviere. And this picture came several decades after the first one, because someone said, "Riviere, you left Daniel staring at the lions. You need to get him out of the lion's den." So he said, "Oh, okay, I'll do that." So if you analyze the picture, it turns out there's exactly the same number of lions, the same number of males, the same number of females, and all different poses once again. Now, what's interesting is many artists, when they get to this point in the stage where the king is talking down to Daniel, you know how they'll pose the animals? They'll pose them sleeping, right? Because they're docile looking. But as we go on in the story, you'll realize that that's actually a bad posture. They need to look as dangerous as they were on the very first day. And this guy, well, girl on the left, she's still stalking him, still as he's talking to the king. It's important because the danger did not go away. The danger didn't go away. So this is a much more accurate presentation of what they're going to do. It's just great. So anyway, he talks down to Daniel, who's still with the lions. He's still in the lion's den. And Darius talks to him. And then Daniel replies and says to the king, "See, you're getting it, right? Next time you're in front of a king and they ask you to speak, first thing out of your mouth, 'Oh, king, live forever.'" Now let's get down to business. "Oh, king, live forever. Well, my God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths. And they have not harmed me because I was found blameless before him and also before you, O king. I have done no harm." And that's why I've been saved. Then the king was exceedingly glad, and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him because he had trusted in his God. So I'm sure when he came out of the lion's den, they said, "Let's check you out here. Let's check you out. You okay? How about this? No bites at all? No bites at all? Nothing. No punctures? Nothing? Nothing. Not even a scratch." So they inspect him, and there's not even a scratch. Why? Because he had trusted in his God. Do you know this story from Sunday school? Oh, okay. Forget it. Here we go. Keep going. So the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions, who they, their children, and their wives. This was actually, I found out as I looked at it, a pretty typical response when there's misdoing in high levels in ancient governments. It was a way in which the governments sort of served notice to the people who worked in a way that wasn't beneficial to the kingdom. That, by the way, if you do things that are not beneficial to the kingdom, you are endangering not only your own life, but your entire family's life. Because what we'll do is we'll kill your entire family. So he carried through. And interestingly enough, Darius, although he was somewhat clueless and thoughtless about signing the document and about what the repercussions would be, he is following the law in this particular way about saying, "But don't do this anymore." And he recognizes these guys as being, see the word? As being malicious to the kingdom and malicious toward the king. So they get the den of lions. This, by the way, is a biblical theme when we talk about spiritual evil. And this comes out a lot when you talk about David, during the time of David, when he writes his Psalms. Many of the Psalms recognize the fact that those who are plotting evil will themselves fall by the same devices of evil. How they plot for me, that's how they'll fall. So David says that many times in his Psalms, that they set a snare for me, but they're the ones who are going to get caught in a snare. And God says this many times too. Those who plot evil think that they're on top of things, but in the end, that evil will eventually come down on them. Why? Well, because God is a God of justice as much as he's a God of love, and those who plot evil will have evil visited on them. So this is a good example of that. Well, before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. What? So this is why Brett and Riviere's picture of the lions still hungry Needs to be that way because the danger to Daniel still exists even while he's being freed by Darius. These animals are still hungry and vicious, and yet God in his divine way is keeping these animals from him. So much so you can prove that they're still vicious because when you throw in his enemies, before they even hit the bottom of the ground, they've been devoured. Wow. Okay, gruesome picture. Well, King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth because, by the way, he was in charge as the superpower over the entire earth at the time. This was the superpower thing. So he decides, after this big demonstration about the God of Israel, we need to put out some kind of dictate. So nicely so, we have actually what he wrote to all the kingdoms. Now these are kingdoms that extend from Macedonia and Greece all the way over into India and then down into Egypt. So the entire world gets this memo. Memo to the world. What's the memo to the world? Here's the memo to the world. Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion, people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. Woohoo! Sorry, I get excited. So now, interestingly enough, Daniel's name has now been put on a memo to the world. And not only Daniel, but Daniel's God, who's the living God, not the dead, some God off in the distance kind of God. This is the living God who actually does real things for people who follow him. This is amazing. And you need to, and I love how he starts it, you need to tremble about this God. Now, what other king had this reaction? Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar had the same kind of come to Jesus moment. I mean, he came to realize this, and he notifies the entire kingdom. What an incredible effect Daniel has had now in 2 consecutive kingdoms in the same geographical area. That because of what he did, it turns out God's glorified. And the kings actually say, wake up, everybody. We need to realize that in all the universe, there is one living God, and this is the one, the God of Daniel. Wow. Whew. So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So Darius is a Mede, Cyrus is a Persian. We don't know if they ruled kind of consecutively. We don't really know that relationship. But Cyrus is the one in the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, those books. Cyrus is the one who has this aha moment and says, we need to send the Jews back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple and to rebuild the walls. Now, we don't know the connection with Daniel, but in this particular case right here, I am strongly persuaded that because of this incident right here, that Cyrus, who was eventually going to come, had again one of those moments where he says, you know what? The God of Israel is real. We need to let these people go home. Because if this God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, if this God can save a man like Daniel from the lion's den, what can this God do to us as a nation? You know, politicians and kings are always kind of putting this together. What's going to preserve the extent of my kingdom? What's going to elongate the days that I'm here in office? What do we need to do? I think we need to let the Jews go back home. That's what I think we need to do. And so when you get to Ezra and Nehemiah, that's exactly what he does. I think this is really tightly connected. There's another tight connection here as well. When you get to the Christmas story, you have three wise men coming from the Middle East. And we're pretty sure they came from the Mesopotamian River Valley, which is where we are right here. I mean, the Medo-Persian Empire and the Babylonian Empire. It could very well be that the prophetic influences that Daniel had, which we'll see coming up a little bit later, and we've already seen some of, leaked over into a class of people who were people who could interpret the spiritual signs of the times. Because they very clearly came from this area. They almost certainly were Persian. Almost certainly. And so that would be about 4 centuries after this. So was there an influence of Daniel on that? Yeah, could be. We don't know. So that's highly speculative. But this kind of influence where your name and the God of Israel goes out on a memo to the world that you need to tremble before the name of this God, that had to have an effect. That had to have an effect. Okay, we're going to quit the story and just ask some simple questions. Simple questions is what we're all about. How do you proclaim God, especially in a twisted culture? That's a twisted culture. How do you proclaim God? So we're going to stop, and we know the narrative. You know it clearly, all the drama, all the intrigue. How do you proclaim God in a culture that's so twisted like this? What did Daniel do specifically? Now, before we get to this, and this is very simple Bible observation. This is just Bible observation. What makes this next thing we're going to do is in the category of what I call questioning the scriptures. Ask some questions. Ask some questions. And it's in asking the right kind of perceptive questions that the answers you find are obvious, just laying on the dirt. They're just right there. You know, jewels that are lying on the dirt you don't have to dig a mine for. So here's the question. How do you proclaim God in a twisted culture? And what did Daniel do, so much so that it resulted in the name of the God of Israel being put on a piece of paper and proclaimed throughout the entire known world? What did he do? Massive evangelism program? Well, let's just look. Let's just look. Because it astonishes you when you look at it. Remember, it started off with this unjust thing. You know, he had his political adversaries. What's your response when you're unjustly accused? Let's put it this way. What's your fleshly response? Oh, yeah? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Self-defense. It's always self-defense. Did Daniel do that? No. So, I mean, look at Psalm 119. The wicked have laid a snare for me, but I do not stray from your precepts. They laid a snare for him. They put together the perfect entrapment plan. There was no weaseling out. As soon as the king signed that document, boom, they're done. And Daniel's toast, right? It's all unjust from the top to the bottom. But what the writer of Psalm 119 is saying is that even though they're laying snares for me, snare is a rope trap to catch a bird. You lay the trap, you wait for the bird, you pull the stick, the box goes down, all that kind of stuff. So all of my enemies are plotting, and they're laying traps for me everywhere I go. And that's wrong. That's unjust, because I don't deserve that. But that's politics. And that's when it comes to jealousy and stuff like that. So really, under the circumstances of injustice, you have to endure that injustice without an ego. Now, I want to say this really clearly. I used several words to say that phrase. Because what happens is that when you're unjustly accused, and you know it's unjust, you know the facts better than anybody else. But they're promoting facts that aren't facts. They're spinning things and they're twisting things. And what you want to do is say, well, I have this ego that tells me I need to just correct the facts. That's not true. Your accusations are wrong. Let me tell you what the facts are. I'm the person who lived this experience. And you start trying to correct the misfacts that are coming out. And there's just no way you can swat at them fast enough to get them to go away. And then your ego's involved in it. Because it's the principle of the thing. This is wrong for them to accuse someone who hasn't done anything wrong. You just got to drop your ego in the entire thing and go, huh? Okay. Now, I've had personal experience in this. And in 3 particular cases I can think of, large cases. And one of those cases got us moved to Utah. So we endured without an ego. It's not about that. There's bigger things going on. And God understands your position. He knows who you are. He sees the injustice. And remember how we talked about before that the evil that people want to put on you will eventually be put on them? You can sit back and say, well, I just don't have to sweat this. I can put my ego on the shelf, say, they can say what they want to say, but it's untrue. It's untrue. It's untrue. So this is one of the issues that will actually contribute to your influence in a twisted culture. Really? Yeah. Because what it'll say to everyone around you is they see your very non-emotional response to unjust accusations. They'll say to themselves, why aren't they defending themselves? I don't get it. Why aren't they getting in there like everyone does in politics and beat each other up? I mean, why aren't they out there saying, this is just not true? Why? And so it raises a question that causes people to look at you and wonder about you, which is okay. Which is okay, because the wondering will be answered soon. That's one thing that Daniel does. He doesn't respond with his ego. What about your spiritual practices that you do? right? Now we're talking about with Daniel, we're talking about prayer and probably more, but visibly his prayer. What do you do in the midst of a twisted culture with your spiritual practices? Because, come on, aren't you tempted to hide them in front of the twisted culture? You go to a restaurant, you're there with non-believers, the food is served, and this awkward moment comes. Should I pray or shouldn't I pray? Let's just not do it this time. What do you say? We don't have to do it. So there's this pressure in wanting to be included in the twisted culture to kind of put your spiritual practices on the shelf. Because after all, I can go home in my closet and close the door and I can pray there. I don't have to do it here, at Denny's. I can do it anywhere I want to. No, you should not let it affect your spiritual practices. And it didn't with Daniel either. Psalm 119 also, he says, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. And we've seen that. That's a very famous passage from Psalm 119. And what it says is that God, his light, illuminating the darkness where we are, shines not only close by for where my next feet are going to go, but down the path. So it's like a short-term and a long-term light. It tells me where I'm supposed to walk. And then the verse right after this, we never read, says, I have sworn an oath and confirmed it to keep your righteous rules. I mean, I'm continue going to do what I've always done in terms of my spiritual practices. And your light of who you are has shown me what my spiritual practice should be today, your feet, and for the rest of my life, your path. He's informed by the Word of God about what he needs to do. So he's not going to let the culture bend him in terms of his spiritual practices. And sure enough, Daniel didn't let that culture bend his practices, even though he knew it was probably going to be a death sentence, especially when he moved his chair up to the window, right? So your spiritual practice should go undeterred in a twisted culture, but you're tempted not to because you want to fit in. That's the problem. Third on my list, where do you live when you want to influence a twisted culture? Do you live like in some safe zone on the other side of the country and send helium balloons with messages on them and waft them over the country and hope that people read the messages? No, the residence when you want to influence a twisted culture is actually in the twisted culture. So you need to actually live in that community. You need to live in that community in order for there to be a real change. And Daniel clearly lived in that community and very prominently. I quote this from John because Jesus was saying this. This is how you'll influence your culture in John 13:35. By this, all people will know that you're my disciples if you have love for one another. Well, how can they see your love for one another if you don't live in the culture? By this, all people will know. All people will know. So it's a matter of living in residence in the twisted culture. And while you're there in the twisted culture, loving, doing whatever it is that's characteristic of your faith in God. And in this particular case, Jesus says they'll notice when you love one another. They'll notice that. And especially, he's talking to the apostles right here. And if you think about the diversity in the apostles, these guys are not naturally friends. These guys should, you had a guy who was a zealot. He was a guy who was actually bought into the whole idea of using rebellious force to oust Rome. I mean, real guerrilla warfare kind of guy. You got that guy. Then you got a guy who's a tax collector who was buddy-buddy with Rome, right? They should hate each other a lot, which they might have at the beginning. We don't know, And then you got fishermen, stupid fishermen. So, you got everyone. These guys are not naturally meant to actually get along. But when they go into the world, and in the conflict of the world and all of the problems they're going to see, when the world sees them loving each other and loving the larger community of Christians, that just does not make any sense. It makes no cultural or ethnic sense that these people should love each other. Then the gigantic question rises in people's minds, why do they love each other so much? This does not make sense. I can love my family. I can love my ethnic relatives. I can love the country that I come. I can love all those things that are natural. But these folks come from all sorts of places and they love each other. What's going on? Well, they'll know you're my disciples if you love each other. And they'll know who you are if you live in the midst of a twisted culture so they can see just the natural interactions you have with one another and also your spiritual practices. And lastly, I had a list much longer than this about the visibility issues of your life in this culture. And I'm back to the windows. If he did anything differently, and he might not be that different, he still did his spiritual practices undeterred, but he decided to do it in a visible way. He could have made it invisible, but he decided it could have just maintained the visibility that it always had. We don't really know. But he decided to make his practices, his prayer, his habits, who he was as a Jew, and his relationship with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he decided to just make it open to be seen. Open to be seen. No fantastic extra effort. We need to be transparent in the twisted culture we live in. We need to be transparent. About what? About what our normal lives are. This topic came up years ago, maybe more than 10 years ago here with us, when we got kicked out of the TV station in downtown Salt Lake City, and we were broadcasting both Doris' shows and Earl's shows down there live TV, which I advise you don't ever do. It's terrifying. But live down there, we got kicked out of there. And as we left out of there, we had to replicate all the technical hardware that we had at the TV station for broadcasting and for recording. We just used their equipment. Now that we were out of there, we wanted to continue doing that, but we didn't have any equipment. So we bought a piece of equipment. We still have it to this very day that we can actually broadcast and record. It's a mini TV studio right back there under the soundboard. So we bought that and we said, hey, you know what we can do now? We can, if we want to, we can live stream our services on Sunday morning, which at that time, nobody did. Nobody did. When we get to COVID, everyone did because everyone was at home. But at that time, we said, well, we've got all the hardware back there. We invested in it. We can do TV shows where we can record. We can stream on the internet. Why don't we just push 2 or 3 buttons on Sunday morning and we can stream? And why? Transparency. Because people who are questioning not only their own beliefs, but wondering if there's another belief system, many of them would love to just be able to walk in and see, is there real life here? Is there life in other places we've never been in before? So instead of putting on them that whole weight of walking into a bunch of strangers, and I got to admit, you all look like strangers. Strangers, okay. Instead of doing that, which takes a lot, that takes a lot of courage, and some people have done that over the years. Good for them. God bless them. But instead, we've advertised for years saying, look, if you just want to eavesdrop on our service, click a button on the internet, and you can be here for the entire service, for the singing, for the prayer time, for the teaching. You can just see what goes on here. And I've had a couple of people say that kind of diffuse the whole process of them coming in live to see what's here. Transparency, transparency, transparency. Live your normal life. Don't do anything different. Don't have an evangelistic Sunday morning. Just do your Sunday morning. And have it be transparent, that people see. And so that's why we decided to do that. And then we continue to do that to this day. Jesus said this in the Sermon on the Mount. He said, you need to be transparent. Why? Listen how he says it. You're the light of the world. A city set on a hill can't be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket or on a stand. On a stand, it gives light to all the house. And in the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who's in heaven. That's a fantastic endorsement for transparency in terms of your life. And in doing so, you will shine light on a culture that's dark, and they'll see that and wonder. It always has kind of amazed me that that last statement is there. Are we against good works? Because we say, oh, it's grace through faith. It's not good works. Well, good works is actually in that context means earning. You can't earn God's favor with doing good things. But what Jesus is saying here is he says, live your normal life and do the good things that God has trained you to do and that you love. Things like loving people who don't deserve to be loved. Things like compassion towards people that no one's compassionate toward. All those things that Jesus is like, that he's replicating inside of you. He says, do that. Live your normal life in relationship with me and do it transparently. Don't put a basket on your life. Because I've put a light in you and I want you to shine here. I want you to be transparent here. But unfortunately, we have the tendency to put baskets on our lives. To live kind of quiet, unseen lives in a twisted culture. Don't do that. But you don't have to do anything extraordinary. Just live your normal life. Live the life of following Jesus. Love one another like Jesus says. Do what you do. Do your prayers. I mean, just do it transparently. And things will happen. I'm a firm believer in that because I've had friends over years, pastors, who have decided that they're going to do a huge, massive push of evangelism into their communities, and they need to have these special services like on Saturday night that are meant to be evangelistic and blah, 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 and they're very different. Unfortunately, someone who comes to that doesn't get a good view to the heart of the people that are there that have been transformed by God. They see sort of it's not phony necessarily, but it's a made-up view that's meant to be more palatable to non-believers. Now, and I get the strategy, and I think there's some merit to it. But in my mind, there's something much more powerful when someone just comes in and sees who you really are, and they see a heart that's transformed. They see all the rough edges. They say things differently. And I'll just share one example of this because this really profoundly affected me. And it happened here years ago. I won't mention who it is. You know who it is. A woman who'd come out of the Mormon church. Well, actually, at the time, she was sort of transitioning out of the Mormon church. Has since become just a wonderful believer in Jesus. But we were having one of our potlucks, like today. Just like this. And she was here largely because her son had made the first step into the church here and had started to pave the way to look into all this stuff. So she came with him one Sunday, and it was a potluck Sunday, and she was sitting right about where Steve is. We were using long tables. We didn't have round tables back then. And she was very silent throughout the entire lunch. I mean, silent, but she was looking a lot. And I came up and I sat up next to her and sat next to her, and just to be friendly, I said, "Oh, we're so glad you're here. Glad your son's here. So what do you think?" Because she clearly was checking out everything. I said, "What do you think?" And she said, "This is right." And she's just watching us eat lunch. But she saw more than us just eating lunch. She saw us loving each other. She saw something that she'd never seen before in the context in her LDS church even. She saw something that was very different. And you know what we did differently that day? Nothing. Nothing. But when they can see you, when they can hear you, when they can understand what God has done in your life, when they see the normal life of the body of Christ, something is extraordinarily attractive about it. No phoniness, no artificial programs. Just be transparent with who you are. And Jesus says, don't put a basket on your life. Let people see it. Just do that. One other quick example. I know I said one example. There was a woman that was here from Jews for Jesus. Her name was Susan. You remember Susan Mendelson? Maybe some of you might. She was here very briefly for a short time several years ago. And she had this habit. She was here midweek one day, and she said, let's just you and I go out to lunch. So we went out to lunch down at the Mexican restaurant down here. And we had lunch there. She told him it was my birthday. They brought out a sombrero, all that kind of stuff. But Susan's habit as a believer, and this is not artificial on her part, is she asks everyone she meets, can I pray for you? This is what she does, every place she goes. So we're sitting there having lunch, and the waitress comes up, and we're finishing our meal and stuff like that. And Susan says, well, can I pray for you right now? And I'm kind of going, ooh, bushel basket, ooh. And I thought the waitress would be kind of put off by that. And she started to tear up. Right down here at Ricardo's. She started to tear up. And Susan said, looks like I need to pray for you. So she told us some things in an appropriate way. They were really kind of tough. So as we're sitting there, while Susan's got the sombrero on her head, you just got to see this. She prays for this gal, and while she's praying, the tears just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then she said, thanks for praying for me. No one really does this for me, except my grandmother does this for me. She's the only other person. And so Susan says, well, who's your grandmother? She says, well, she's right back in the kitchen right now. Would you like to meet her? So we say, sure. So sombrero and Jim, we go back to the kitchen. And we meet her grandmother. Some of you know who this lady is. We meet her grandmother, and she and Susan become fast friends on the spot, grease on the griddles, all the 9 yards, and they talk about their love for Jesus and how they will talk to anyone about Jesus, because this happened to be exactly what her grandmother did. Every time she'd meet someone, she'd pray for them. You just got to live your normal life, but you got to be a little transparent about it. Forget the bushel baskets. Or the sombreros, by the way, they're distracting. So I think we're done. So there we go. So let me pray us out of here. I don't know if I picked a song after this. Everything and Nothing Less.
I try to be childish, but I'd actually like to change that to This Little Light of Mine.
This Little Light of Mine.
This is acapella. I'm not going to go up there. It's not going to play the piano. Just real quick.
We'll do that. Okay. Much more appropriate. Father in heaven, we thank you for preserving these stories, these real stories of people who we like to put in the class of courageous and bold and daring, but he just did what he always did. He just did it pretty transparently. And Father, you blessed not only the nation he was in and the kings that he served, but all the people in those kingdoms. It's an amazing thing you do when we just do normal stuff. And we exist to be a blessing to the people around us. And that's what you did with Daniel. Father, we do not want to have to face dens of lions, but we know that might come someday. But in the midst of all that, we just pray that you'd remind us about what Jesus was saying about put the bushels away, put the baskets away, and just live your normal life that you did yesterday, today, but in full view of those who are wondering about the God who created them, and wonder if he even cares about our existence, and wonders whether he might actually on the off chance love us. So God, we pray that you would use us in powerful ways to be the light of the world you call us, that light might be something that draws many to yourself, and not because of our exceptional actions, but because of our normal lives lived in gratitude to you. So thank you for this passage. It encourages us. Amen.